Where is my flying car? I watched the Jetsons too growing up, and the answer is actually going to be my first spoiler. I don't know. I don't know where they are, and nobody actually knows. As you heard Imran say, I help people prepare for a future that they can't predict. Predictions really aren't my thing. I mean, I think predictions are interesting, but actually most predictions are traps. They're kind of trap because they convince us that we know what will happen when the future is fundamentally unpredictable. I'm actually a lot more interested in how the future is going to surprise us, because it always does. Maybe we'll live like the Jetsons. Or are we going to live more like Minority Report, right? If you remember that film, you had autonomous cars fly. The only characters in Minority Report that actually drive are the police when they're chasing the bad guys. Or maybe it's going to be like Blade Runner, right? You've got hardly any vehicles in a bleak and crowded city. Well, those are possible futures around mobility, but they're just a few, and there are actually many more. And as Imran also pointed out, they aren't just stories about cars. Each one of those stories are actually about whole societies. That's my first big point. When it comes to the future of mobility, not just cars, but all the way things and people move, I love this topic because it's actually a way to think big and broad about the future in general. So to understand what I mean, let's look back. Before we look forward, look back over the last century or so. What changed when mobility changed? Railroads, cars, air travel. Well, what changed? Well, cities changed, housing changed, where we live changed. Manufacturing changed, retailing changed, shopping changed. Warfare changed, policing changed, law enforcement changed. The environment certainly changed, food distribution changed, family structures, pretty much everything changed. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that what do we expect will change if mobility, how people and things move, changes again? I think this story is about a lot more than cars. So in the next few minutes, I want to tell you about some work that we are doing right now and what it's got us thinking about the future of mobility. And the premise of that work is that human nature and human values are enduring, but human contexts are changing. And the future that is going to emerge is going to be created not just by technology, but by this kind of rich exchange between enduring human values in changing human contexts. And when I talk about human context, what do I mean? Let's talk about a few things that we know are changing in the world. I mean technology, of course, but also demographics and society and politics. When we talk about the futures, there are very few things we can say for sure, but I think there are actually 5 things we do know with confidence are going to shape the future of mobility. First, over the next 15 years, we're going to add about 1 billion more people to the planet. Now, the growth is mostly coming in just a few places, Africa and the Middle East in particular. So, China's very large population, slowing in growth. Europe may actually shrink, but the African population between now and 2035 is expected to grow by about 50%. So a lot more people, but distributed in some new ways. Second point is that the number of people living in cities is going to keep growing. Right now, we actually already have over 50% of the global population lives in cities. And about 3 million people move into cities every week. So we're headed by, again, in the mid-2030s, at least 60% of that growing population is going to be an urban population. There are going to be a lot more megacities, that's cities over 10 million people, larger urban corridors of all kinds. And frankly, probably a growing divide, which we can already see between these growing cities and the rural areas where fewer and fewer and fewer people are going to live. Third point, we know for sure that the average age of almost everywhere, every country and every region is going up. Most of us live in rapidly aging societies. So people living longer, and they're having fewer children, especially, again, as they move into cities, means more people living more closely together, but as an aging population in a way that we've never seen before. Now, I need to point out one exception. Remember what I said about the population boom in Africa, and you heard a little bit about this on the panel earlier today. The median age in Africa right now is 19.4 years old. That's half the median age in Europe. That divide is only going to grow. So Africa is growing and young, and it is the opposite of the story of the rest of the world. Fourth, you heard a lot about it this morning, we got to talk about the climate. The climate is changing, and just in the next 10 to 15 years, scientists tell us that we're going to see, with high confidence, a world that's about 1.5 degrees warmer. Now, that's not the 3 or 4 degrees warmer that you heard about by the end of the century, but it means we are close to a time at which all the models suggest we could have big consequences for food, for water, for the places we live, and frankly, the places we can live. Fifth of the 5 things I want to tell you about, the things we know are shaping the future, is technology. And it's the one, again, that most people talk about. We all know that technology keeps advancing. Many people know about Moore's law, which is this, for digital technology. It's the law that says the effective power of a computer chip doubles about every 18 months. So it doubles, and it doubles, and it doubles again. And that's the kind of growth pattern that's very hard for most of us to really get our heads around over time. But if you do the math, it means that if we just stay on the current path we're on, like no change to where we are now, on the current path we're on, by 2035, computer power will be 1,000 times more powerful than today. I study this stuff all the time, and I have no idea what that means. But I know that it is very hard to imagine, and it has this other interesting effect that most of us don't think about. The same effect means that the computing power that sits at the leading edge today is going to be much cheaper and more plentiful in the future. So imagine all the capabilities in this device, which I bought a few months ago when it came out, about $1,000, available for $1, right? Because 1,000x in the other direction means a $1,000 device for $1. So that's the other impact, right? High end gets 1,000 times more advanced. Same process means $1 is going to get you something with at least that level of sophistication, and you can put it anywhere. So what do we know? We know as we look into the future of mobility, it's going to have to be in a world with many more people that live more in cities, that are getting older almost everywhere, that are going to be truly stressed by climate change, but with much more powerful technology around them, and they will need to get around. Now, there are a couple things we see in the world of transportation that give us some strong clues for how it could happen, right? You've got the evolution of electric cars, the emergence of connected cars, cars that communicate with each other or the city around them. The potential of increasingly, although obviously not yet perfectly, autonomous or driverless cars. And then the idea of using an app to call a ride, which means people increasingly buy rides, not cars. Now, some people in the car business call this CASE, C-A-S-E, for connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. And their big question is, so how fast is CASE coming? Great question. Once again, the problem is no one knows. And that's the thing when we're thinking about the future of mobility. The most interesting things, to my mind, aren't what we know. They're what we don't know that matter. So what are some things, if those are the 5 things we know, what are some things we don't know? First, we don't actually know why people will travel in the future. What do I mean by that? Well, work is changing, education is changing, retailing is changing, entertainment is changing, even how we socialize is changing. Basically, all the main reasons that people get in a car or some vehicle every day are also changing. Right? The idea that the car itself changes and everything else stays the same is nonsense. Everything is changing about why we use the vehicles we use. So how's mobility going to change? For example, if far fewer people are commuting to work or need to drive to go shopping, why will people travel? Second, if we assume that we're headed for these connected, autonomous, shared vehicles, what are those systems going to be designed to do best? I mean, who's going to run that system, and who are they designed to serve? In one future, those systems are optimized for the individual user, the individual passenger, to have the best user experience they can have. But there's another future in which those systems are designed for the best system performance, right? Is it good for me, or is it good for all of us? And I think it might actually be a different future in different places. But importantly, that's a design question that I do not hear enough people talking about. Who will the system be optimized for? Third, in a world where mobility is fully autonomous, what's going to move and what doesn't? I mean, right now, you and I mostly move to the things that we want. But what if in the future things move to you? Not just individual objects delivered by a driver, but whole experiences. Why do we go to stores when stores could come to us? Why do we go to restaurants when food can come to us? Fourth, we don't know how the mobility of the future is going to interact with the mobility of today. I think actually for the next generation or so, it's likely to be this interaction, this conflict between today's mobility and tomorrow's that's going to really become the big headache that a lot of us are going to have to solve. And lastly, how much time do we have? Right? Is this going to happen sooner or later? That's actually the question I hear in every boardroom. How much time do we have to figure this out? How much time do we have to prepare? And that brings me to my last point. Change doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't go all in the same direction. It's something I learned from my friend Stuart Brand. Some of you may know him as the founder of the Whole Earth Catalog and one of the creators of the clock of the long now. Every complex system, said Stuart, like your company, like mobility, like society itself, every complex system is made up of a lot of parts that are changing at different rates. And understanding what's happening means we've got to understand what changes fast and what changes slow. Now, some things change fast, things like what's in fashion or what's popular. Business models change fast, technology changes fast, but some things actually change slow, like social structures, like belief systems or infrastructure or the rules that we live by. Now, a healthy system is one where the things that change fast and the things that change slow are in balance, and we get things wrong when we forget the things that move slowly are actually healthy when they move slowly, right? You cannot move deep culture at the speed of technology. It's why we actually get some friction when things that move fast, like tech, and business models start challenging cultural norms and rules. So what does it mean for mobility? One thing is that this case, connected, autonomous, shared, and electric, it requires some things that move fast, like technology and business models, to sync up with things that move slow, like cultural beliefs about personal freedom, about control, about it needs to be synced up with the construction of cities and roads, all of which were built over the last 100 years for human drivers. It's going to have to get synced up with rules about who's responsible for what and when. And let me say, technology does not win. It's way more complicated than that. We see now that with the challenges to ride-hailing or the growing concerns about autonomous cars, that there will be pushback. And that means the future of mobility, the future we experience, is not going to be a straight line from what we have right now. So if you're looking for the future of mobility, don't look at flying cars or scooters or drones to see the future of how we're going to get around. Look at the changing world that has new needs. Look at changing cities and the people who live there. Look for young people and the things they care about. We often tell each other that somehow one day they're going to grow up and be just like us. They're going to make the choices that we make. They won't. And that's the last thing to say. The future isn't written. It's not written for us. It's not waiting for us to discover it. The future is being written by us in a million little ways. And I think you, the people in this room, have a lot more influence than you know. I think there is a future where we use this interface to get wherever we want to go with vehicles of many different types, all of which are owned by someone else. That would be a system that's probably better, safer, and less harmful to the environment than today, but it's just one scenario. I believe that the tech challenges get solved, even the hard ones, but if you want to understand the future of mobility, focus on what's changing in society, what's changing in government, and what's changing in the built environment. And don't be fooled. The auto companies do not control this. The tech companies do not control this. They are navigating change too. The work that I do with them, they are trying to learn and adapt as best they can. And they're not the only authors of the story. I think the people in this room are central to understanding the future because you shape the culture. This is a cultural story. Creative companies change what people aspire to and what they want in their lives. And that means to me that you're far more than observers in this story that's being told. Future of mobility isn't an auto story. It's not a tech story. It's a cultural story, a social story, and it's going to be learning about what's at the intersection of possibility, need, and desire. You're going to help write that story, and you're going to do it in collaboration with many others around the world. I see a future that could be enormously enhanced by the conversation that's possible between this community and the ones who believe they are building the future of mobility. And I can't wait to discover what happens when there's a lot more of what you know, what you inspire, your joy, your vision, your knowledge, how that becomes part of the world yet to come. So thank you.